Welcome to this week's episode of Lamboat's Vanflip podcast. On the show this week, I have Josh Middleton, formerly of Architects, but currently full-time Sylosis mastermind, so to speak. How you doing, Josh? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm doing really good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. This is always fun to do these international podcasts. I do a couple here and there. It's very weird aligning the times because you guys are so, behind us on the East Coast here.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't done one in a while.
A podcast or just with Lamgoat?
Yeah, no, a podcast in general. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I know you were on you were on Craig's podcast with the Downbeat.
Yeah, quite some time ago now.
Yeah. Is that something where because he's also in the UK, do you just link up and go over to each other's house? Is that how that works for the most part?
We used to. Yeah, he used to literally live a 5-minute drive from my house. We were inseparable for many years. And
yeah.
Watch movies together every night, and then but now he lives up in Scotland, so it's a flight. Got to get a plane to get to see him. So yeah, I don't see him as much. So whenever we're on tour and we're in Scotland, Glasgow, then I'll see him.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess all the people that go on his podcast or at least appear in person have to go to Scotland these days.
They're up there. Yeah. So most of the people he has on, I think, are on tour. There's a few where they're not on tour.
Yeah.
But I'll get a plane up to go see him if I'm not on tour. So
it takes a plane to go up there? You can't just drive, or what's the trek like out there?
The drive would be about 10 hours something. So I mean, obviously the UK, not as big as Texas, but from where I am, down south near London to the top of the country, I wouldn't do it for anyone. That drive.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what made. I mean, I know that he is he's got some Scottish, in him and or whatnot, but it would be weird. I guess he just wanted to get away from it all. You know what I mean? That makes sense too.
Yeah, fresh start. Yeah, and it's kind of cheaper up there as well, and it's a great place as well. So yeah.
Cool. Enough about Craig so much, but you made an interesting point about him living nearby, and because the UK and especially the London area and whatnot, there are a lot of bands that come from London and the surrounding areas. So it seems like you guys have a kind of a tight knit music community. Again, you used to live kind of close to the Strays from the Path guys, so how what's the community like near you, and do you still have other bands like that? Maybe not on the level of Stray or your bands, but bigger or smaller bands. Do you still get to hang out with those guys, or have they moved on and done other things?
Yeah, there's not as much, and the UK scene is kind of good at the moment, but it's different to how it was when we were coming up, especially in the very early days of Sylosis. There was a lot just in our own hometown. There are a lot of bands that were all kind of doing well. Craig's old band, The Atrophy. So I have a bunch of friends that were in bands from that time, and that I still see. But yeah, I feel like some of those bands aren't around anymore, and there's a new crop of bands that I don't know as well. But the scene in general is cool over here.
Yeah, that's good. I mean,
I've been around for a bit.
Yeah, but you've also been very busy. I mean, you were in, formerly of Architects, which toured the world, played shows with all sorts of bands and all sorts of levels of their career, and, opening bands to fucking playing with Metallica and stuff. So, you've kind of swung for the fences with that, and you guys kind of hit. So I guess what I really want to start with is what made you, and I'm sure you've answered this a million times before, so apologize for asking, but what made you decide to just Sylosis full time? Because you were doing both for a decade plus, so did you just felt like it was time to kind of move on from Architects to do more of a passion type project, or how'd that go?
So I mean, the Architect stuff, I'm still friends with those guys and still speak to them, so not to I don't know what the term is, but we're just trying not to talk about it much, just because you say one tiny thing and it gets
taken
flipped
out of
on its head
yeah.
somehow. So I mean,
I'll preface it with this: you're all buddies, you're all friends, and I would assume that you just kind of did all you thought you could possibly do in that band as you, and then maybe you were wanting to focus on another project, whether it be heavier, lighter, or a different genre. So that's kind of what I would assume, because there was nothing, else out in the public, and you guys are all still buddies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we'll run with that. I mean, that's kind of I think that's fair to say. Like, just kind of like reached a natural conclusion, I guess.
Yeah.
Just say that, like, in music and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't really want to say like musical differences necessarily, because like I love like super heavy stuff, but I also like Radiohead and stuff like that, and those guys still like super heavy stuff as well. So it's I think it kind of just is what it is now. But Sylosis was the first band I started, and it's like it's just a huge part of me in my life and my musical DNA, and it's kind of like I'm just compelled to write that kind of stuff. And I think like one of the main things I took from being in Architects was being able to collaborate more. Like that was, I did always like seek out the other guys, input and everything. Mm-hmm. But when I first joined Architects and first started writing for Holy Hell, like the first two songs that I submitted or gave to Dan, who would sort of produce the work. I'm sorry if you can't hear a screaming toddler in the background.
I can't hear it at all, so you're good, man. You're good.
Awesome. So he'd like kind of produce my work and rearrange things and like take stuff and that was my verse, but now that's the chorus and this kind of stuff. And to begin with, not having had anyone be so I don't want to say brutal, but like so hands on with like my work, that at first was like really like, oh, this is horrible. Like I'm not used to like having something that I've had a vision for and something in my head that get changed around and manipulated like that. And over time and over years, like it still could be uncomfortable, like, because obviously music and songwriting can be really personal, or it can just be like a difference of opinion. But learning to kind of let go of the reins was hard, as I used to, in terms of like creative control, and like that was really beneficial for me as a person, like as a songwriter, and to the point where the latest Sylosis record, which I'm so proud of, has been like just actively seeking out critique and actively seeking out like more input as much as possible. Like, tell me the songs suck, I want to know. Just like rip them apart. I can take it now. So like my time in Architects definitely helped me adjust to that, and it's made me a better collaborator. And yeah, and I don't think it was like an ego thing necessarily. I mean, like you just kind of like have a vision for what you want to do sometimes,
right?
But learning to let go has been beneficial. So
yeah. I mean, obviously,
I just started waffling then.
Yeah, you're good. They want to hear you talk more than want to hear me talk. So just keep that in mind
when
we're going through this. So it must have been difficult. I mean, because again, you came into Architects like during they already were established for the most part. Obviously they've grown since 2018, but still it must have been difficult, kind of like having a way that you songwrite and write music and stuff like that, to where it's like, again, giving up the reins and doing all that. So it must be like refreshing, to be able to fully focus on just your main passion project, which is Sylosis now. And that being said, does the new record, A Sign of Things to Come, right? Does the new record kind of maybe go a little heavier than the previous stuff because of maybe you had I'm gonna say like pent up stuff, but like not towards the band, but just like ideas and stuff that you had in your head that you probably couldn't use for like the Architects project or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely stuff that I write that can't be used for Architects, and it might not even be like heavier or anything. It's just like the type of riffing. Like after Holy Hell, Dan was kind of like, go weirder, write less generic. Not that he was saying that I was writing generic metalcore riffs, but just like we need to, for Architects, try and go somewhere else. So I was kind of like trying to write quirkier riffs and doing like octave pedal weird stuff, and so try and make the guitar sound more like a synth. So just the style of riffing alone, like I like a lot of traditional metal stuff. Like I grew up on Metallica and Sepultura, so it's just like a different school of riffing as well. And obviously, like this record, The Sign of Things to Come, this was like we were writing it as soon as the pandemic hit. Yeah. So I was still in both bands. It wasn't like I've left one and now I'm doing this new one. Yeah, so for me, there is a lot more like heaviness and like intensity injected into the new record, but that came from me kind of like taking a step back and realizing that I, over the years, kind of not lost touch, because I've always loved heavy music and stuff, but I feel like the more you get used to just sitting in front of a computer writing with a guitar in your lap and just kind of getting better as a songwriter, we kind of lost where we started as kids, where we were listening to like the Great Southern Trendkill and like Slipknot records, and you just want to like flip a table like when you're like pissed off little kid, you know, like that kind of exciting intensity and energy that I love about metal is like my favorite thing. Even though I'm still proud of everything we've done, and the records we have done have all been heavy, but just I wasn't putting enough of that electricity into it. So like I'm writing the record in here like stood up playing riffs, like trying to like feel it a bit more, you know. Yeah, exactly. Like, and so yeah, it's just been like kind of reconnecting with the roots of the band. And when I say the roots of the band, this is like completely widely undocumented, because we were a band for like 4 years before we released any music. So our very first EP was released in like 2005.
Yeah, how old were you when you started? How old were you when the whole band started? Like, must have been like a young teenager, right?
12, I guess.
I was going to say. So wait, you released that first EP or whatnot, like at 16, 17? Is that the time frame?
No, I must have been older than that. My time frame is all over the shop. But like Sylosis, we started essentially in like the first day of like high school in the UK, so like when you're 11, 12. And I already was playing guitar, and I met this kid in the first class I had, who turns out he played drums. I was like, amazing. And then it turned out he lived down my street. I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I like took all my guitar and my amp down to his house straight away, and that was the start of Sylosis. But it was a few years of finding other members, because it was hard to do pre-social media, or just hard to find anyone in our own school that liked heavy music. So yeah, we were a band for quite some time, and when we started, we were listening to like just everything. It was the end of the new metal period, so like Slipknot, and then you had like Pantera, and we were getting into like Cannibal Corpse and stuff, and loads of like the Relapse grindy stuff, Pig Destroyer and Burnt by the Sun, like just anything that made me want to like trash my bedroom, you know. Like,
yeah.
So that's something that I always seek in heavy music, but the more I kind of reflect on Sylosis records, I just feel like it wasn't coming out enough, even though I'm proud of all of that music, and we're not going to like disregard all those records we have. We'll still always have a foot in that sound, but yeah, definitely want to inject more of that electrifying feeling of when you're a kid and you like the first band practice, when you crank your amp up and you're playing with a drummer and it's loud, or the first time you like the first time I put on Iowa by Slipknot, I was like, this is exactly what I want right now. So just trying to capture those feelings and put them into the music.
Yeah. What is the scene like for you when you were a younger kid over there? Like, did you have an older brother or a friend that was turning you on to this stuff, or how did you kind of like fall in at a young age to the heavy world? Like, because you said you were 12, so I'm assuming you were listening to that before you were 12, before high school. So how did you kind of go down that path?
Yeah, I kind of just discovered it all for myself. Okay. Weirdly, like, I started playing guitar when I was about 8, maybe, and then when I got to secondary school, high school, I had a friend who had an older sister that bought Kerrang magazine. And she was like, you should buy Kerrang magazine if you like this type of music. So I just started buying that and Metal Hammer, and just kind of, you'd get like cover mount CDs, like free CDs every maybe a month or 2 months. I don't know how often
like
they
compilations with tracks on them from different bands.
Yeah, yeah. So I would hear just loads of bands through those CDs, and I just look at pictures of bands. We're like, they look cool. I'll buy an album to see what it's like. I remember seeing a picture of Korn, and I went out and bought the Good God single, which was one of like the first like heavy records I bought, and I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want.
Yeah.
So,
I did a lot
yeah,
of the same thing. Did a lot of the same thing. Continue though. I'll get into that later.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of it. Like I just I was discovering it for myself and just trying to get as many people as I could into it. But there was like 2-3 people at my school that would like heavy stuff, so I was kind of a bit of an island on my own in terms of that stuff.
Yeah, no one showed. I didn't have like, you know, speaking to people on the podcast or just in general, like a lot of musicians or a lot of people in the scene or whatnot. They seem to have like an older brother or a friend of something that would put them onto that, and like I get envious of that because I didn't have something like that. I was like the canary in the coal mine, and I found the bands first, and then I showed my friends and kind of got them into it. But you know, no one was giving me anything, and like you, I would go through like Circus magazine, and I would, you know, look at the images of the bands, or just like listen to the compilation CDs and stuff like that. Because I got into nu metal earlier on, and then fell into metal and hardcore and everything like that shortly afterwards. But yeah, I miss those days of like having, I mean, that kind of connection with the magazines and like the CD booklets and stuff like that. That's always like a very important time, I guess, in a youngster's musical career, like finding themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the kind of the more like mysteriousness around that era. Like you can, I didn't know what the guys in Slipknot or Pantera sounded like until I bought like the home videos or something. Like you didn't. Yeah. You just see a magazine every now and then, and you'd have no idea. Like there was a bit more mystery between the audience and the bands, which I kind of liked. But obviously, that's how I grew up appreciating music and like the industry. So I just obviously, like most people, just like how they grew up with it. But I feel kind of like proud that I didn't have anyone like an older brother or something show me that stuff. But part of me is like, I always felt like I'm definitely not the most mature person I know, but for the time, like, I was just like, can you guys like all kind of, you know, raise, like, get up to my level? Because years later, when I leave school, all these people are like, now they're into heavy music or alternative stuff, but at the time they were just like, whatever's on TV and stuff. Yeah. And the big part of music for me was like, I was into skateboarding. I had a bunch of friends that I used to skate with, and we would skate with older kids from a different school who were like 5 years older than us. And they all liked heavy music, but they would lend me CDs, but I would also lend them some. Like, so it wasn't like I was getting everything from them. It was just like a mutual thing. But I would hang out with older kids because they're the only ones that were into alternative stuff. And one of the CDs I got because of a Kerrang, like one of the first Kerrang compilations, was the Will Haven first record, and I was like, this is the coolest, heaviest, meanest record ever. And I literally gave it to someone the next day, like, borrow this is amazing, and I never got it back.
Whoops. We just had Jeff on the podcast not that long ago from Will Haven, so that's kind of, you know, cool. Awesome. That you brought that up.
I love that band.
Yeah, they were pretty good, and they're you know, doing some stuff now. They're releasing their new EP album number 7 or whatever it is. Yeah, so they're still cranking it, you know. Have you ever like traced back like what band actually got you in to heavy music? I know you said Slipknot, Iowa, and like Korn, the Korn single you bought, but like before that, did you ever kind of like this is the reason I stopped listening to whatever my parents were listening to, and then went in a whole different direction? Like, is there a band or a song that you can remember?
Good God would probably be it. So like I was already into Slipknot before Iowa, but that record was the big one for me. So like when I started playing guitar, it was like the first Foo Fighters record, Radiohead actually, because they wherever like even Oasis, like it was easy to
I don't think
play
you
when
could
you're
be in
beginning.
England or the UK and not enjoy Oasis, right? Is that like a faux pas thing?
Uh, maybe yeah. At the time, I mean, they were at the time I started playing guitar, they had done the second record, I
Okay,
think,
yeah.
and yeah, they were the biggest band in the UK.
In the
Um,
world almost, you know,
yeah,
they're
and then
huge.
yeah, and then I got into like Smashing Pumpkins and stuff, and Rage Against the Machine, and Smashing Pumpkins like have some kind of riffy stuff and elements of metal, and then Rage
I'll
Against the
give them a
Machine.
couple. There's a couple. They're not my favorite band of all
Yeah,
time.
no, yeah, like Zero's kind of like riffy, and
Yeah.
there's some cool stuff, and they're just like a natural progression of like just checking stuff out. But I think the Good God single by Korn was like it was so heavy
Yeah.
and like intense. I was like, this is perfect. And then when I remember when Follow the Leader came out, even as a kid, even as like a snotty little 13-year-old or whatever, I was like, oh, this is a bit more like polished and not as
Yeah.
cool. Like, oh, not for me. And then Slipknot came out. I was like, yes, this is like way more intense and high energy and like amazing. And the thing I love about Iowa is because of all these bands, like you had like Korn and Limp Bizkit, who'd bring out a first record produced by Ross Robinson, and it's gritty and it's heavy, and then they do a follow up that's like
Yeah.
commercial and
Yeah.
polished and stuff. Slipknot kept going on about how they were going to get heavier and it was going to be more intense, and I was like, oh, I really hope so, but a part of me just like, well, it doesn't usually happen that way.
Right. Right.
And they were already like huge. I remember seeing Slipknot on the first record. They played above Rage Against the Machine at Reading Festival, just one below the headliner. On the first record, they were already like one of the
Yeah.
biggest bands on the planet. So I was like, really hope the next record is heavy, like they say, because in my experience, it doesn't really happen like that. And then Iowa came out, I was like, this is exactly what I want. And that's when I was like already like checking out. I was getting into like death metal and Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, and dipping my toe into the extreme world. So yeah, like that whole period was really exciting.
Yeah.
Like discovering stuff.
I kind of wish Slipknot kept going down that path of like just one upping their heaviness, but you know, they got to a point where they got really really big, and you know, to maintain that really really bigness, you got to write songs for a lot of people that to enjoy, you know, and they still have it. I'm not saying they don't, right? But it's not Iowa or the self-titled, you know.
It'd be interesting to see what would happen if they got like Ross involved in a record again
Yeah.
or anything like that. But
Yeah.
but yeah, they're a big band for me growing up, and Pantera, another one. When you just look at their career, just like Cowboys to Vulgar, Vulgar to Far Beyond Driven, Far Beyond Driven to Tranquil. Like as a kid, as a heavy music fan, they just got heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And that time in the
Well, they had to
90s,
shed
when it
that
was
hair
like,
metal side. They had to like
well,
make everyone forget
yeah.
about that hair metal part.
Yeah, true. But like as a kid in the 90s, and I loved like loads of the new metal stuff, but there's a reason why. I mean, I think they're a great band, but people wanted like heavy shit, and like as fans, when you get a record that's even heavier, like yes.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at like their career paths of those records in the 90s getting heavier, and like Slipknot, Iowa, like as a fan, I'm always kind of like seeking that. We got a comment recently. It was like we put out this single "Poison for the Lost," and the reaction was like overwhelmingly positive. Like just, I try not to look at all the comments and take it
Yeah,
too seriously, but I was reading them. I was like, this is like amazing, like so positive. And there was one bad comment, and it was still a positive comment because it was like, this isn't my Sylosis. This is too heavy. I was like, yes,
Nice.
like that's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry
I
for
mean,
your loss.
I don't want our fans to be disappointed. I genuinely don't like, want to alienate anyone. But
yeah, but you're not gonna make
kid
it.
in me.
You're not gonna make something for everybody. So you know.
No, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, and it's a diverse record. Like the last single, I think shows that. But the like little 14-year-old kid that is still in me, like that likes all this sort of music, was just like,
Yeah. What would you ever? Have you ever tried to work with Ross?
I haven't. No, I admittedly, yeah, I don't know.
We get like a new
I'd be
Metal
interested
Sylosis
to.
record. You know, that would be tight.
yeah. Well, I'm definitely into opening up that conversation up. Maybe we'll dip our toes in with an EP or something.
Yeah,
Just see
yeah.
how
I
it
think
goes.
that I think I
Yeah,
might have spawned a thing in your brain. So hopefully that comes to fruition now that I've said that.
yeah. I'm surprised I haven't because like I genuinely just went on a streak before, well, whilst writing the new record, of specifically seeking out or just revisiting Ross Robinson records, even
Yeah,
like the Glassjaw record.
of course.
There's a there's
Big. Are you a big fan of that?
not like a huge fan. I
Okay.
remember the song "Pretty Lush" being on a Kerrang CD, and there's a I haven't even thought about it now, but I kind of ripped it off. There's like a break in the song where he just goes like no or something, just like this frustrated noise,
Yeah.
and then like our single "Poison for Lost" has a similar sort of frustrated
Interesting.
breath before the last chorus. I was
Yeah,
like, oh yeah,
interesting.
probably why I got that from. But there's like an intensity to all those records that he captured that is magical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like vocal performances in particular.
Yeah, he's a great
Yeah,
producer, especially for that time. Yeah, he was like he had his little grubby hands in all the badass records, including
yeah,
Glassjaw, Limp Bizkit, and Korn, all that stuff. Yeah, that's how. Like, I mean, Glassjaw is like one of my all-time favorite bands, but they were like they were new metal enough and scene enough, like hardcore enough, for me to start like my trajectory started going a different way from new metal, and that was the band that kind of pushed me into like hardcore and more metal, and then like Hatebreed and all that other stuff. But um,
yeah.
God, what was I gonna ask? So where did your love for Metallica come from?
Yeah, that came. So I was already into Metallica a bit, and I had maybe some singles. I used to buy a lot of CD singles back in the day,
Like what version of
pre-internet.
Metallica though? Like, because Metallica when we were, I'm almost 40, so I'm assuming you're kind of in the ballpark of my age.
A few years younger, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you're like
But so
30-ish or
they
something.
were on, yeah, they were on Reload when I
Okay, yeah,
started like
same.
buying the magazines, and I think I bought like the Unforgiven 2 single and got the some old tracks as live
Yeah.
versions on there. And I remember showing my sisters. Here's an older influence actually. I've got an older sister, but she wasn't really into music in the same way. But she had a boyfriend at the time, and showed him "Sick" by Slipknot, and I was like, "This is great." You like, it's got these drummers going. It's like, no, that's not drums. That's like double pedal. The start of "Sick."
Yeah, yeah.
He was like, if you want to hear like cool double bass drum stuff, you should check this out. And he gave me "And Justice for All," and I
Mm.
still have his copy that I stole all these years later. So when I heard that, I was like, oh, this is amazing. He showed me the solo to One,
Mm.
like tapping, and I was like, oh yeah, this is great. Tons of riffs. I remember all the like the harmonized guitar stuff. Like asking him, I was like, "Is that a chorus pedal?" He was like, "No, that's like two guitars harmonizing together." I was like, "Oh." I had a little 4-track at the time, so I used to kind of just like write harmonized
Mm.
stuff all the time. That
Pre-internet,
and Justice for
pre-internet,
All
you couldn't look
was,
stuff up. You know, you had to like just ask
yeah, yeah,
somebody else or figure it out.
exactly, yeah. So, and Justice for All was like the first one I really spent time with, and it's obviously probably the most aggressive. Like Hector was probably the most
Yeah.
screamy on that one, which was in the new metal era, or just that era. Like everyone's just screaming. Any metal with like singing, I was a bit like,
Mm.
I
Yeah.
don't know, but yeah. So that kind of started. Slipknot would always go on about like death metal bands, Morbid Angel and Cannibal Corpse and stuff. So I started checking them out, and then getting into Metallica. I started going in a more metal route, but
Mm-hmm.
I was always into hardcore and stuff, or bands like Hatebreed, Poison the Well,
Yeah. Classics.
everything kind of, all that kind of stuff from that period. I think when you're still young, you're not specifically in like one subgenre where you're
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, it was
almost
all
elitist. Yeah,
just one kind of like I used to call it the scene. You know, I'm into scene music. You know, the hardcore
right.
scene,
Yeah,
metal scene, whatever the fuck. And then you grow up and you figure like, oh no, there's different scenes in different genres. So that's what that means.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I got in. I think. I mean, I was able to to watch like Enter Sandman on like VH1 or MTV or whatever in the '90s, but I didn't really like get into it uh, because I was so young and that seemed like an older band at the time. I think when like Load came out and some other songs, I was like, okay. Again, these were like the ballad versions of like Metallica, right? I didn't listen to any
Yeah,
of like the Injustice for All or Kill 'Em All until much much later, and I was like, oh, I get, and like it was such a like a light bulb moment for me. Going, that's why everyone fucking loves this band. It's not because of the. I mean,
yeah,
the radio hits are the radio hits, obviously, but like these guys actually are shredding on these older albums and shit.
yeah, yeah.
So how?
I didn't have any of that stuff either. Like, I didn't have any music TV or Sky, or
Yeah.
I had nothing. So just the four channels that we have here in the UK on terrestrial TV at the time in the 90s was all I had. So I didn't discover anything alternative through TV or anything.
So it was just basically like
I wish.
print magazine. It was like print
Yeah,
magazine and word of mouth from your like local people.
yeah, pretty much just buying Metal Hammer and Kerrang and Rock Sound magazine religiously. Never missed them. Just bought them, yeah, for
So
years.
so let me get. You just said you had four terrestrial channels on TV. So like in the '90s, you guys only.
BBC One,
Yeah, 2 and 3.
BBC Two.
That makes so much more sense
Yeah,
to like a person in the states here. Like what's the difference between 1, 2, and
but
3?
there was only two BBC. It was the BBC One, BBC Two, and then you had ITV3, different company, and then Channel 4 was separate to the BBC. So we only had two BBC
But there was only like four
channels.
channels
But
on the TV. Like you could only choose four stations on the TV. There wasn't like a cable option.
yeah,
Or if you had satellite,
I
I'm
mean,
assuming.
yeah, if you had satellite or Sky, but my parents never did.
Ah,
And I didn't have the internet for a long time as well. So
yeah.
not many people did either, at least in the UK. I think it was quite common to just have the four channels.
Yeah, that's crazy in the
Yeah,
90s. I mean, that's something like we had obviously earlier on in like the 70s and before that, but it's always been like a handful of channels. And then, but when you get expanded cable, there's a lot of dog shit on there, so it doesn't really matter in general.
yeah.
So it must have been wild though for you as like a fan of Metallica to one day, share stages with Metallica.
Yeah, I didn't really think that I'd get to do that, or it was just I've always had like a lot of confidence in what I do as a musician and the music I've made over the years. But the chances of getting a slot supporting Metallica just seemed like
Right.
so minuscule. So I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to do some cool stuff, but not to sound too arrogant. But playing with Metallica, I was like, yeah, it'd be great, but I'm not going to hold my breath for
Yeah.
that to happen. So yeah, it was insane. Like, especially, growing up watching their home, like their live show DHS tapes I used to have, where they're playing, and they've obviously been playing in the middle of arenas since like the Black Album. I never thought I'd get to play on a stage like that, and it's so weird because they've got the snake pit in the middle.
Yeah.
You don't know which way to face, and this particular stage that they're touring with on this tour is the biggest they've ever done. So like you'd all be trying to like cover some ground and take up some space on the stage and keep moving. But I'd be like halfway around from my station where I've got like my water bottle, my guitar tuner, and my microphone. I'd be like, oh, I've got to do a backing vocal in 2 bars. I can't get back to my microphone in time.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a learning experience, and it was cool. We got to hang out with him briefly. I've got a picture of me holding a cake that James Hetfield gave us.
Nice.
Uh, I've got another great picture that our photographer Ed took, where I'm like putting some dumb face because I was just saying, I love the riff on the new album in Crown of Barbed Wire that goes, and you can kind of see James going, what riff is he talking about?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they were super friendly. Yeah, amazing experience.
How many dates was that? Just the one show, or?
It was so annoying. It was 3,
Okay.
and the middle one I got. And the band is doing more with them next year as well, by the way.
Right.
But the middle show I got food poisoning or some sickness bug, and it took me over a week to get over it, and I had to miss that middle show.
So you only got to do the one show, or did you get to do the one?
2.
Okay.
I did 2. So the first one, sick for the second one in Paris, and then I did Hamburg in Germany.
Interesting. Yeah. One of the things I think that is really fascinating with metal and the fan base is it is quite large, even though there's not a lot of mainstream help coming. I mean, there's definitely big mainstream metal bands out there, but metal is big. Even like smaller bands get a lot of love, but it always seems like Europe and UK have like a more crazier fan base for metal over there, and like you guys have the bigger festivals, and you've had them for years, right? Like you said Reading, although Reading is not necessarily like a heavy music festival, but like you've had
Used to be,
right,
but not now. Yeah,
you have you had Hellfest come up, and you had like Download, and you had all these other festivals, Whack and Open Air, and all these other things that have recently been going on. Why is it that metal is so prominent over there and not necessarily as prominent in the States?
I I don't know. I don't think it is that prominent.
No,
I don't think.
maybe from an outsider's perspective, it just seems like you guys
Yeah,
do a
no,
lot of metal over
I get
there.
it. Like the shows and the festivals are really cool, or at least like the festivals. I think. Um, but yeah, from my experience, I think the amount of metalheads per capita isn't any greater here.
Oh,
If
okay.
anything, I would say it's maybe smaller.
Hmm.
And finding people into alternative music is harder, I think, in the UK. And there's less bands, like there's obviously tons of bands in the US
Yeah, true.
and so many of these like scenes and cliques of people. Um, I think what it is that shows aren't quite as um, consistent in the UK. So like a US band will probably only do like one UK tour per year or per album cycle.
If that, yeah, yeah,
Whereas in the US, you're going to get them coming around a few times, and people are like, I saw them last time, I
true.
won't go.
Yeah,
And maybe they're a bit more not as bothered. So I think people are a bit more excited to see bands over here just because it's made up more commonly of US bands that don't come over as much. So maybe they're a bit more excited about the shows.
yeah, that makes some sense.
And I guess it's kind of maybe the same with Europe, but in Germany, heavy music is definitely bigger, probably bigger than metalheads per capita in the UK
Right.
and maybe in America as well.
They like aggressive
Um,
stuff. I don't, Germany with aggression.
yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
got it.
they'll have they have like heavy bands will chart consistently over
Well,
there,
I'm sure
whether it's
Ramstein
like
is like their oasis too for a lot of people.
yeah, they're huge, but even like more traditional stuff like Accept or Doro
Hmm.
probably charts really well, just in the same way that Electric Callboy are probably huge over there as well. Like, so it's cool. Yeah, Germany is like one of my favorite places to tour and play shows.
Nice.
They treat bands well. Yeah.
That's cool. I haven't myself made the trek across the pond yet to visit any of the European countries or the UK, but yeah. I mean, hopefully in the next year or so I will be able to. I'd really like to go to either Hellfest, Download, or one of the big festivals over there and have us cover one of those. I think that would be a cool
Hellfest
thing.
is in like the lineup is insane.
Yeah, I
Like
did. Go ahead.
it's every band.
Yeah,
Like it's like every band that has ever existed. Like you look at the lineup, I don't know how many days it was this year, 3 or 4,
I think 4.
and how many stages, and like every stage, you're like, yep, I'd see them, and you're like,
Yeah, you probably miss a lot. Like, you probably get attracted to the festival, but miss half of, if not more than half, the bands you want to see because of the set times and the scheduling. But yeah, Hellfest is up there because I'd like to be able to say, like, I did attend the U.S. Hellfest. I did attend the last one in 2004 or 5, and
nice.
2004. And it'd be cool to, like, go to the... Fuck. I guess next year's is 2024. That'd be a dope festival to go to. 20 years later, going to the European Hellfest. I might have to make that
there you
happen.
go.
Go to
Yeah.
France. For your band Sylosis, speaking of like breaking over, like metal music being different in the UK and in Europe and America, when did you start to notice that you were kind of like breaking away from just the European fan base and getting like a fan base across the ocean, like America and everything?
Uh,
And is it
yeah,
hard? Is it hard for a band to like break?
yeah,
break
totally.
across?
Especially like growing up reading print media at the time, like the late '90s, early 2000s. especially those new metal days, it felt like, and most UK bands from this period, and the guys in Architects could probably attest to this, that like it felt like you had no hope being from the UK. That UK bands were just tiny at that period. Like none of the heavier bands were breaking through the noise. You had stuff like from the past, like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, but in the new metal era, like, could you name a new metal band from the UK? I can, but they never.
I mean, there's one that I kind of consider it, but you know they've been disgraced at this point. But Lost Prophets was kind of like one of the new metal.
Yeah.
bands.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Okay. They're like an exception, but by the time they broke out, I wouldn't say there was any metal left in there. But the first record was new metal for sure. There was a band called 1 Minute Silence that did okay, but it just felt like the odds were stacked against you, and like being from the UK was not cool growing up, so it felt like it would be an uphill battle. But I think things started to change anyway with the internet, and I don't know if it was specifically due to them doing well, but Bring Me the Horizon were probably one of the first British bands to get big in the US, and like I don't know if that was like opening the door for British bands, or like it felt like British bands could be cool. Obviously they were like a pretty cool band at the time. Obviously you had like, I guess, Bullet for My Valentine, maybe they broke out, but before that there was like this 10 years of nothing like poking its head up. So yeah, it felt tough. So but yeah, for us, I think the first time would have been the first time we toured in the States. We did a tour with As Lay Dying in 2011. We'd been over for New England Metal Fest just for the one show, which was expensive. But yeah, we did that tour, and on the way to joining the tour, we flew into LA, and we were borrowing As Lay Dying's old van that we picked up from there, but the tour started on the East Coast. So we did like a headline tour on the way to the East Coast, and that was our first time in the States, so we were like, this is going to be terrible. Obviously, no one's going to know who we are. And so our first shows outside of New England Metal Fest were headlining shows, and one of them was the Rosa Villa in Columbus, where Dimebag got shot, which was like not a very well attended show, but there were people there, and like we were kind of surprised that maybe there weren't tons of fans, but the fans that we did meet, and I think this has always been the case with Sylosis, are like super into it, like super dedicated, like almost like a cult like following, it seems. And the first time we went to Canada, we didn't go on that tour. We did a tour in Lamboat the following year, where Randy it was in between his, like, you know, going back to court in the Czech Republic. He'd been in prison, but he hadn't gone back, so the tour couldn't go to Canada. We did a tour in 2013 with Trivium. The first time we went to Canada, we were like, oh, we need to come back here, because Canada's scene is like, well, for us anyway, or maybe for our type of music more so, it was like
interesting.
We like sold like 4 times as much merch on that first night. We were like, oh, this is
nice.
Let's keep coming back here.
I know.
But yeah, it was a slow process.
Okay, that's interesting.
Any waves.
The internet definitely changed the game for a lot of people, including Bring Me the Horizon. I know we have like 4 or 5 more minutes left here before I got to cut you loose. There's 2 questions that I was going to ask, but I think I'm going to just break it down to one. Which one am I going to ask you?
I can try and do both. I'll try.
Fuck it. Well, I think we'll probably have just the one, so I'll do this one.
Okay.
Architects was at a certain level, and no offense to you, Sylosis is a certain level too, but they're different genres of metal, so that's to be known, or to be expected. But you've graced a lot of stages in the last 6 years, 6 or 5 years with that band, and a lot of those stages were huge stages. Like, again, you just played with Metallica, or you didn't just, but you played with Metallica. You've also played like a lot of headliner spots at festivals and just headliner shows in general, in arenas and all that other stuff. Are you? And again, not saying you'll never be back to that size of stage, but for the time being, is that going to be like something you miss, like that sized crowd and playing for that sized crowd, or do you kind of enjoy a smaller, capped room, smaller stage, more intimate show?
Yeah, I love small shows for sure. But we were fortunate, so that Sylosis hasn't been on tour since 2016, but we've done like a handful of shows we like just came back with a record after a 5-year hiatus, just as the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, Architects were busy, and I just do some shows here and there. But like the last show Sylosis played, we got to support Lamb of God and Creator at Wembley Arena. So that was Architects had headlined that previously, and I played it before. So that just felt like, I'm back on the big stage again. But I've also played some smaller Sylosis headline shows, and I just, all of it is great. There's benefits to both, but small shows and clubs, super fun. I definitely don't have any like ego about that stuff. I just love playing live. So
I think a lot of people,
whatever the size of the stage,
I think more people enjoy, or at least they say they enjoy, the smaller intimate shows, because you don't want to sound like a complete d-bag when you're like, I enjoy the big stage and the all lights and attention.
The big stuff fun for sure.
I would assume it is wildly fun.
To me, I really like. I think the sweet spot is like 3,000 cap.
Yeah,
that's
even
for
big.
When it feels, it's still big.
Yeah,
big. For sure. But like arenas are just vast, and club shows. Yeah, you want a bit more space on the stage, so you're not like bumping into everyone.
You don't want to play a bar. You don't want to play a bar, like a little bigger stage than a bar stage.
Yeah, I think my only thing would be play venues where, and this won't always be the case, but where you've just got enough room to step back from the mic and not be stood on the drum kit.
Yeah, for sure.
So but other than that, like I'm easy.
All right.
There's definitely perks to both.
One more. I'm going to slide this one in, and you can answer within like 2 seconds, 90 seconds, 120 seconds. As a Pantera fan, and you had mentioned you played the club where Dimebag was kind of shot and ultimately killed at. How was that for like you as a musician, not only like a metal musician and a fan of the band, but like someone who obviously lived, I don't know how many fucking miles it is away from Columbus to where you are in the UK, but like how was it being there on that same stage?
Weird. I mean, it was a pretty overcast day, so it was pretty kind of like just
dreary.
Mood was low anyway, and it wasn't cool really. It was, but it was a weird feeling. I can't remember it too well. To be honest, I don't think we really
realized it.
Overthought the whole thing. I think we realized it because it was like, we knew what happened there, but I don't think I was really thinking about like the incident that had happened there. Like, and looking back now, and maybe I did, but it's obviously been over like 11, 12 years since it happened, since we played that show. I guess my answer is kind of boring in that it wasn't. Yeah.
Well, that's good though.
I can't remember much of it.
That's good. It didn't really affect.
But it was kind of bleak. It was bleak.
Yeah, I would assume it would be so. All right. Well, we'll end it on that note. There, a little bleak note. For those who have made it this far, Sylosis' new album has been out. I think a couple of days, because this will release
September 20th. All right.
This will release shortly after that. So like within a handful of days. I think the Friday before this podcast comes out is when the album comes out.
Right, my bad.
So you've probably already checked it out. If you haven't, listen to it. Are you guys, and again, this won't be released for another month, so are you guys planning a tour for the States?
We are planning to make our way over there, in 2024. That's the plan. Nothing to announce yet, but yes.
No problem. We will be on the lookout for that for sure. And again, Josh, thanks for your time today. If you haven't, check out Sylosis. You can check out all of Josh's links that are going to be in the show description below. And we look forward to the new album. Well, that's already out currently, but now we're recording it a month in advance. I've already heard it and everything like that, but everyone is looking forward to it. So, man, thanks for your time, and we appreciate your being on the show. And if you need anything, just let us know.
Thank you for having me.
No problem, dude. Thank you.